All right, good evening. In the run-up to the local government elections, political parties have been releasing their manifestos. The ACDP's manifesto summarised says a clear economic plan, a brighter, more secure future. Let's get some analysis. Ongama Mtimka joins me now. Thanks so much for your time on SABC News. Just give us your reaction to that ACDP manifesto launch and the speech we just heard.
Good afternoon, Nzinga and your viewers. So it's interesting that what we've seen is a huge change from political parties that are contesting with a view to securing office in a number of municipalities to today seeing a lot of political parties that want to foreground their role either as activists that stand for anti-corruption as far as the UDM was concerned, for example, a short while ago, a party that foregrounds the values that it stands for and in fact cements its position in the public psyche, mainly as a pressure group. I don't think that the approach of the ACDP is coming across as a party that wants to secure government per se, but is one who position themselves as stewards over certain values and therefore try to justify their need to continue to exist in municipal councils on the basis of the values that they defend and represent. If you look at that message, and especially in the past 20 minutes, there's a very strong emphasis on the rights and freedoms that they want to defend, which mainly are national issues. Obviously, the manifesto of the party talks to the broader issues that all the political parties are highlighting. But I noted today that key distinguishing factor of these political parties has been what is it that they seek to position themselves by. So all political parties in South Africa this week, what they've done is they've attempted to maintain what we would call industry standards on all the issues and then emphasize the issues that they differ from the others.
All right, if we take a look at their performance in the 2016 local government elections, as you've said, no councils, but they were present. They got around 22 seats. That's about 0.42% of total support. How do you expect them to fare in these local government elections, and why do you hold that view?
Sure. So it's an interesting one. Voter approach to the ACDP has largely, in my view, across elections, hovered around close to 1% mark. It seems to me that it's the party that voters who are loyal to it who vote with an intention to keep there, being there, as opposed to gaining a lot more support with an intention to ultimately become a significant opposition party or a governing party. Notably, it's maintained consistent support base and has actually survived in a political environment in which many parties that have been small have actually subsided from the political system. So their resilience to maintain, even though an insignificant percentage of seats, suggests that its voters are voting to keep it there in line with what the attitude would be to pressure groups, by the way. It's there, it's neither growing nor declining significantly to actually be wiped off the political system.
All right, let's talk about how the ACDP functions within South African government, national government. We heard Kenneth Meshwe saying a little bit earlier on that it's his choice and it's people's choice to take the vaccine. No one's going to be forced to take the vaccine. Seemingly moving away from the government position of encouraging people to vaccinate, saying that it's an experiment. He doesn't want to be experimented on. Just talk to me about, this is quite a mouthy question, so just bear with me as I lay it out. One of the ACDP's points in their manifesto is also around, and I'm quoting them here, amending laws and policies that undermine family values, such as granting access to contraceptives and abortion for young girls without parental consent. In my reading of that, it takes away the choice that Methwe is speaking about. I spoke about it a little bit earlier on, and it's infringing on the rights enshrined in our Constitution for a person to make decisions concerning control over their body and reproduction. So how then does a party like this, which is quite clear on what it wants and doesn't want, function in a state where the Constitution is very clear about what you can and cannot do?
Sure. So this is an interesting one. The ACDP adopts a very conservative, or let's say one would say hovers between center-right and right positioning in terms of its policy outlook. Now, it lends itself to something which is a libertarian principle, by the way, as opposed to conservative. So we've seen a lot of changes of positioning and with COVID-19, where you find that those on the conservative side are suddenly defending freedom, and those on the liberal side are in fact for forced vaccinations. So what we do in political science in terms of contribution to these kinds of questions, the main issue has been the harm principle when it comes to choices. So the argument is that everybody is free to the extent that they can even inflict self-harm, right? That's the argument that has been advanced when it comes to, abortion, among other things. That people, if it is that it is risky, then people have a right to self-harm. Where the challenge has been brought, especially by parties like the ACDP, is on the question of to which extent can you consider others? Because the harm principle says a person can harm themselves as long as they didn't harm others. Now, in order to justify a question of whether a fetus is an other or is not an other, so how that question has been resolved is on the question of whether or not a fetus is an other or it's not. So the ACDP would say it's an other, and therefore the limitation of exercising freedom stops to the extent that you are harming the other. So that's their view. Then if you go to the issue of vaccination, the harm there, again, it's a debate of to what extent does failing to vaccinate constitute a harm of not just the self, but the other. Now, it's an interesting one because the medical debate currently has been that to not vaccinate, you stand a chance to actually infect others. However, there hasn't been clarity. In fact, the medical science position at this stage is that even when you are vaccinated, you actually can infect others. So it's an interesting one that the lines of, so the point I'm making is that there's the line when it comes to libertarian principles is the harming of others with your freedom. So it's going to be interesting how the science and the debate unfolds on the question of whether or not to not vaccinate results in a greater harm of others compared to when one is not vaccinated. In my view, it's an emerging debate which will be conclusively addressed once the scientific exploration has gotten to the extent of a very clear what constitutes harm to others and what does not. As long as it remains this thing of if you're vaccinated, you can actually infect others, even if, and if you are not, you can. It will continue to be this thing where you find politicians are able to navigate and speak for or against because the medical science has not been conclusive on the extent to which those who are vaccinated or unvaccinated can spread COVID-19.
Ongama Mtimka, thanks so much for your analysis on SABC News this evening, talking about that ACDP manifesto launch. Let's stay with news of launches. The African Transformation Movement launched its manifesto in Mthatha today. Let's take a look.
The challenge